Okay, taking myself off of a big screen. There we go. Um, well, hello everyone, and it's again really an honor and a privilege to be with you all again and to uh, speak the Dharma, um, listen to the Dharma and learn the Dharma together. Um, I'm in a different spot than my typical home, so I'm hopeful that the internet and that the audio and video quality is good enough um, for it all to come through loud and clear. Okay, great. So tonight I thought I would speak a bit about refuge, and it sounds like really wonderful timing because another teacher recently gave a talk, it sounds like, or talks, teachings on the idea of refuge. So I kind of wish I had been able to be part of that and hear that. And I know that our orientations will likely be different. And what a gift around how to receive different teachings around a similar topic. I just think that's such a treat. So, um, yeah, so just to begin, maybe I'll invite you all as you're listening to this talk to see if you can keep your attention on the body, on the breath, as a way of staying connected to this present moment. And I'll speak a bit over the course of this evening around that connection to presence, how that can really serve as a refuge for us. But I'm imagining that many of you are quite familiar with the idea of taking refuge in this tradition, especially if any of you have sat retreats. It's quite common to formally take refuge in what's called the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I'll go into the triple gem a little bit too, but what does it mean to take refuge? In Pali, the um, language of the Buddha, it was refuge. It was translated as sarana. So the word for refuge is sarana. And it's really defined as a shelter, as a protection from danger, from trouble, a person, thing, or course that provides protection. So it's a place we can stay safe. It's a place that might have a sense of home, of belonging. And as we sit and practice and really develop a relationship and intimacy with the present moment, we really start to see, like, well, what is safe here? Where is safety? So much of what we see is the impermanence of things, that even being with the breath, one breath, and in and out it's gone and then replaced by another breath. And thoughts come and go, and emotions come and go, and there's something so liberating in that we can be with a really difficult or challenging experience and actually notice and see the ending of it, that it is impermanent. And then there can also be a grief associated with impermanence as we lose our health, our friends, our jobs, some of the things that we rely on, that those also are impermanent. And so in this world of change, how do we find safety? Where do we find safety? Just today I was on a hike and I saw the first trillium of the spring. I mean, it's probably not the first, but the first for me. This was Kirsten's first for the spring, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with trilliums, this wildflower that blooms in the spring, and it's so fleeting. Like the trillium, I find one of the most kind of fleeting of wildflowers. It's the one that I saw is white, and it just looked perfect and radiant, and I know that within a few days it'll already start to be kind of curling up on itself, and passing. The bloom will pass. So yeah. So again, how do we find safety in a world of change? What do we take refuge in? So, in this tradition, like I said, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha might be familiar orientations around refuge. And I'll speak to each of those. And at different times, different refuges might feel more meaningful for you. So, you might want to kind of feel into the different descriptions and listen to where your own heart carries you in that sense of belonging, of home. So some teachers also speak of two levels of Buddhist refuge when they refer to the triple gem, an outer level and an inner level. And so taking refuge in the Buddha, for example, we can really bring to mind the Buddha as this inspiration, as this embodiment of wisdom, of compassion, and whose awakening really speaks to our own capacity on that front. So, from the outer level of refuge, this man, who wasn't a statue or a portrait, but just this actual human being made of flesh and blood and bone like we are, but who had an unfettered heart, who freed his heart and mind from greed and hatred and delusion, that we can really take refuge in that man who did this as this possibility. And that can be quite liberating. And then the inner refuge of the Buddha, um, it's our own capacity for awakening. He can represent our own capacity, our own innate wisdom and compassion. Ajahn Chah, Thai Buddhist teacher, meditation master, he would say, we take refuge in the Buddha, but what is this Buddha? When we see with the eye of wisdom, we know that the Buddha is timeless, unborn, unrelated to any body, any history, any place. Buddha is the ground of all being, the realization of the truth of the unmoving mind. So the Buddha was not enlightened in India. In fact, he was never enlightened, was never born, and never died. This timeless Buddha is our true home, our abiding place. So in that, you can really sense this inner layer of what the Buddha might signify for us when we take refuge in the Buddha, our abiding place, our true home, our true nature. And then taking refuge in the Dharma. So the Dharma can signify the actual teachings of the Buddha in this kind of articulate collection of commentaries and teachings passed down through all these centuries. And the Dharma can really function, these teachings can function like a map, with this sort of promise of freedom, of awakening, as this place of ultimate refuge. So the outer refuge of a outer layer of Dharma as refuge could be, the teachings themselves, and then the inner layer of Dharma as refuge is really taking trust in the way things are. The Dharma is the way things are. It's the way of things. So really, what is it to take refuge in the impermanence of things? What is it to be alive without clinging to it? The poet Huang Po, a Zen poet, he has something, he talks about nature, and Dharma can also be translated as nature, the nature of things. And he wrote, Your true nature is something never lost to you, even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It is the nature of your own mind, the source of all things, your original luminous brilliance. You, the richest person in the world, have been going around laboring and begging, while all the while the treasure you seek is within you. It is who you are. So the nature of who we are can also be something we take refuge in. We take refuge in the Buddha that we are, this awakened being, this capacity for awakening, and we can take refuge in the way things are, the nature of the way we are, the way that life is, this unfolding of nature in ourselves. And then Sangha, so Sangha tends to represent our spiritual community, and typically the Dharma community, those guides and teachers who inspire and support us in our faith on this path. And so this outer layer of refuge and Sangha, we can really place our faith and trust in those who walk this Buddhist path. Those teachers, those guides, those spiritual companions on this path. And as an inner layer, we might think of Sangha as really inspiring the deepening of the relational heart, of compassion, of loving kindness, joy, equanimity. What is it to even shift beyond the Buddhist community to really feel supported by all beings who are dedicated to waking up? For me, I really consider nature to be so much of my spiritual support, my Sangha. The trees, the rivers, the stones, they're just, I find that I can take refuge in being part of this inseparable connection of networks that I am so deeply a part of through my breath and my bones and the blood in my veins. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." I love that. I just love that. I'll say it again. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And so here we are, just invariably saturated within one another, connected with one another. And out of this interconnection, we can't fall. We can't be separate. We inherently belong to life and to one another. And this can be a refuge, this refuge of Sangha, of connection. So as the Buddha neared his death, his attendant Ananda was worried that if he died before appointing a new leader, his teachings might die with him. And so he spoke to the Buddha about this, and the Buddha first responded. He had two responses, and one was something along the lines of, if I thought of myself as a leader, then I might be concerned, but I don't. So, I don't really have any instruction about who should lead in my stead. And secondly, he also encouraged Ananda to recognize his own capacity to realize freedom. And these are the words that he purportedly said: be your own island, Ananda. Be your own refuge. Do not take any other refuge. Let the teaching be your island. Let the teaching be your refuge. Do not take any other refuge. So I began this talk, I charted out the triple gem, this very traditional way in which we can take refuge, and um, the ways in which, as you may hear, that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are also deeply connected concepts. These themes of what it is to take refuge in the way things are, the way we are, the way that we are interconnected, the way that we support one another, um, the way in which we inspire one another. All of these are things that we can really um, hold as a place of safety. But here also in these words of the Buddha says, be your own island, be your own refuge. And the reason that I was actually inspired to even speak about this topic was because I recently sat the month of February on retreat at Spirit Rock, and quite deep into the retreat, there was a moment for me where, on a really subtle level, I noticed um, my mind at conflict with itself. Like there was something that happened, and then a judgment that happened around it, and then there was some struggle, some conflict. Um, and that's not unusual, it's not, it doesn't take being on a retreat to notice that there can be conflict in the mind or self judgment or anything else. But what was important in that moment was this commitment that came up into me, out of me, which was, what is it truly to make this self a safe space? Like, what is it to be a safe harbor for myself? A place where there's kindness here, where there's receptivity, where there's gentleness. And I know that I'm not alone in having really deep habits of self judgment or self deprecation or self criticism. Um, I know I'm not alone in that. And what I really got in touch with was, oh, can this place be safe? Can this place be safe for me? And so that idea of being an island to ourselves, being a refuge to ourselves, really can perhaps speak to that particular invitation, a way in which, by practicing and living these teachers, we can become this island of protection for ourselves, and in so doing, provide safety for others. We can be a refuge for others. There's something quite beautiful about how, in taking refuge, we can become refuge. In taking refuge, we become refuge. And you might notice in your practice, it may be a young practice, it might be a very mature practice, but that either way, this coming back again and again to the present moment, we're gradually wearing down this reactivity of our hearts and minds. We're reducing the tendency, this reactive tendency to push away the things we don't like, to reach toward the things we like, to numb out or dissociate when we're not either pushing away or reaching towards. And that in itself, that lessening, that reducing of reactivity, that is developing nonviolence and non-harming in our hearts. It's carving out space to be a safe place for ourselves and for others. Because this practice requires that level of acceptance and honesty. And so our hearts and minds, even without saying, I want to become more this, they become more patient and kinder and wiser and more content. And I know so many people, who started practicing and they didn't even really notice much themselves, but the people around them started noticing, right? They were like, wow, suddenly you seem a lot easier to be with, or more patient, or kinder, because that's what this practice just does. And we become more sensitive to our own actions in terms of actions of harming and non-harming. As we come more deeply into this moment, we and get so intimate with suffering. I mean, that's one thing. This is a path that takes courage, because we really get close to the suffering. That we also become more empathic. We're able to really sense and feel the well-being of others, and there can be a very innate desire to behave in ways that are really non-harming and skillful. So there is this way in which our practice can benefit others through transforming how we are in the world. So we're more accepting, more peaceful. Then even if we're not, um, let's see, kind of engaging in ways that feel very active. I mean, the whole world, just based on our kind of interconnectivity, if we're more accepting, more content, more peaceful, the whole world is, just in this development of our minds and hearts. And at this time, every living being and the earth itself really needs safe harbor from the anger, the greed, the delusion that's playing out so violently, so viciously in this world. And it's true that, at this individual level, we're immersed in these social economic systems that can make it difficult to act in ways that really benefit and protect nature, our fellow beings. But, if we do want peace and safety, and good health and equitable, sustainable ways of life, all of these things that would kind of make life a refuge, then we act in ways that contribute to creating peace. We might gradually become more attenuated to how we make decisions that create more harmony and less harm. And what's so profound, what I find so profound about this practice, this has been also so touching for me with, what tragedies are unfolding in the Ukraine, with Russia, and around this tendency, um, a tendency to counteract violence with violence, right? That there's a such an impulse to turn violently against that which is violent. I mean, it can be so innate, but um, but what's so profound is that these decisions to create more harmony, less harm, if they're not rooted in aversion or clinging, then they're just naturally non-violent. And again, Martin Luther King, who one of the most inspiring people to me, he wrote, "Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for mankind to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. To overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression." And I meant to change the language to humankind, but those were his words. "Civilization and violence are antithetical concepts," he wrote. "Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace and thereby transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalm of brother, sister, humanhood, or more than humanhood, maybe I would put in. If this is to be achieved, Humans must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. The foundation of such a method is love. I love that because there's something here that strikes me. It's like, oh, in doing this practice of showing up, and in so doing, uprooting greed and hatred and delusion from this mind and heart, that's love. Like, that can be considered love. This is a method of love. And it's love for ourselves, it's love for others, it's this recognition of our interconnectedness. And it reminds me a bit of the charge that the Buddha gave to his first 60 enlightened disciples. He said, again, purportedly said, "Go forth, O bhikkhus, for the good of the many, the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the good benefit and happiness of gods and men." Human. Human. "Let not two go by one way. Preach, O bhikkhus, the Dhamma, excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, excellent in the end." So going forth for the good, happiness, and compassion of many, to me that is just, again, that to me is a method of love right there. And these are enlightened disciples, right? So they could just kind of sit back and enjoy awakening. But he's saying, go forth with compassion for the world, for the good benefit and happiness of all. So this taking refuge, this taking of refuge, this being refuge for oneself, and this offering of refuge. I'd like to consider that those are really all the same, or that in some way they are so mutually supportive that they're inseparable. When we really give ourselves to life, to Dharma, to interconnection, to these teachings of impermanence, of presence, that we're becoming refuge, that we're becoming a place of non-harming, of safety. And that just invariably, in carving that out in our own selves, we are offering that to the world. And there's something beautiful too about the trust element. There's a faith element to refuge that I'm not speaking about tonight, but it's a whole other talk. What the way in which refuge really is an act of faith, and how at some level when we take refuge, we're feeling how there's something happening here in this practice that's beyond my efforts. It's like I just show up with the breath, and then everything else unfolds from there. So it's really out of my control. And that relinquishment, such a liberation. To just place the faith in the practice, or in the Buddha, or in the Sangha, or whatever it is that is your refuge, what feels like the place your heart is calling home. So in resting here in this intimacy with life, that's non-violent, that's kind, may we cultivate a place of safety for ourselves and for others. I'd like to end with a poem by John O'Donohue. It's a blessing for one who is exhausted. I like that too, even the title. It's like, when we're so weary, when we're so exhausted by the winds of change, of losing and loving of the impermanence of things. What would be that blessing? What would be the place, the resting ground? So when the rhythm of the heart becomes hectic, time takes on the strain until it breaks, then all the unattended stress falls in on the mind like an endless increasing weight. The light in the mind becomes dim. Things you could take in your stride before now become laborsome events of will. Weariness invades your spirit. Gravity begins falling inside you, dragging down every bone. The tide you never valued has gone out, and you are marooned on unsure ground. Something within you has closed down, and you cannot push yourself back to life. You have been forced to enter empty time. The desire drove you is relinquished. There is nothing else to do now but rest, and patiently learn to receive the self you have forsaken for the race of days. At first your thinking will darken and sadness take over like listless weather. The flow of unwept tears will frighten you. You have traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Stay clear of those vexed in spirit. Learn to linger around someone of ease who feels they have all the time in the world. Gradually, you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. So, those are my words for now, and thank you so much for your kind attention. It's really, again, such an honor to be with you and share the Dharma. And if there's any, comments or questions, reflections, I'd love to hear them. You can just open it up.
May I ask again who the poet? I'm gonna
Yeah,
chat here.
John O'Donohue. John O'Donohue. In fact, here I can put the name of the poet and the name in the
Oh,
chat.
that would be
It's an
really,
extraordinary poem, isn't it?
it really is.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a friend who not only reads poetry, recites poetry, but this is the poem that he really needs to hear right now. So it's beautiful.
Perfect. And maybe Marcia, I don't have access actually to chat everyone, so I just gave it to you. Mary, please.
Hi, Kirsten.
Hi.
That was lovely.
Oh,
And I don't think I would say a constant reminder of kindness towards self is much needed. And it's actually something that's been coming up quite a bit, trying to be more aware of the violence towards myself. And again, I think many share this
yeah.
and how important I feel it is to address that so that we can be less violent towards others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. I can never get enough. And it actually, I have to say, when it comes around to that, whether we talk about, the breath, our breath, finding ease in our bodies, like just to find ease to me is a similar message to that,
Yeah.
finding that ease. And again, kindness and not judgment, and
Yeah.
just less and less violence in our
Yes.
thoughts, in our ways.
Yes.
Much, much needed and beautiful to then turn that around, wanting to be refuge for others, wanting to be refuge for myself and as much for others. And that's always a good reminder as well. It's not all about, you know, the inner work. It's as much to be giving that to others. Yeah, so thank you. Very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I mean, you just said it. I don't, I, I don't need to add any follow-up. It's just beautiful to have that mirrored. And actually, I will just say one thing because you did say how helpful it can be to hear it, and you know it. I mean, it's clear you know this, and yet it can be so good to just get these reminders, and that is in some ways like, oh, refuge and sangha, right? To be with spiritual friends or others who can remind us of, what it is to really embody non-harming for our own selves, for others, and the world. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, Tony, please. I think you're still muted.
I realize that most of you don't know me. I'm Tony Pruitt, and I'm with the Rockland Sangha. And I'm a Rockland Sangha is affiliated with Mountain Stream. But anyway, my question is, and this has to do with my own dilemma. Um, you talked about um, practicing nonviolence, and what the world needs is, not to meet aggression with aggression. But the Dharma and Buddhism also says you have to see the world the way it really is, not the way that you would like for it to be. So, how do you handle that dilemma? On the one hand, I understand that my being centered, my presence, my example has more effect on more people than all the protesting I ever did. But the reality of the situation is that if someone is coming to attack my family, and that includes all of us, including the Ukraine, where's my responsibility in trying to prevent that attack?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for such an articulate, clear question. And your words actually remind me of one of the lines from the Metta Sutta, as a mother protects her child, her only child. Um, and that there's that protective element is very much compatible with loving kindness, with nonviolence. I mean, I think about all of the civil rights movement and what Martin Luther King Jr. really helped incite was nonviolent protest. So I'm not at all saying that actual engagement and responding and protesting is antithetical to nonviolence, to non-harming. But what I am saying is that can't like it's this question, and this for me is the kind of the koan of my life because I'm so um, dedicated to environmental and social justice in the work that I do in the world. So, what is it to actually be engaged and have a skillful, wise response that actually does recognize this is the way things are, and then this is a response to it, rather than this things shouldn't be this way, because that has that aversive quality. The things shouldn't be this way has the aversion in it. But this is the way things are. This is the brutal reality of how things are. And there is suffering in it. And so, what is a wise response to alleviate suffering? I think that is, and I don't have an answer for that, but that is a very compatible question, I would say, or endeavor with um, nonviolence and non harming. I just think that we're very conditioned to uh, react against things that um, we don't agree with, rather than
I
respond.
could, I understand what you're saying, and as an individual, I could probably, you know, consider, standing in front of a tank, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty effective. In fact, if you look at the Ukraine right now, and in Russia, you see many people who are protesting and winding up being uh, getting sentenced to 15 years in prison in Siberia.
Right.
I can understand that, but they would not be able to do that protesting in the first place if it wasn't for the people who were standing up and fighting. Gandhi would not have succeeded if other things hadn't been going on in the world that took the attention away from India. Martin Luther King, I don't think, would have been as effective if it hadn't been for Eldridge Cleaver and the Black Panthers.
Yeah, yeah, I see where you're going with this, and I'm still. I think it would have to be uh, I would love to have more of a dialogue actually around where are the like um, where are the ways in which our views are not necessarily reconciling? Because I would kind of keep pushing and also sort of maintain this sense of, yeah, and I believe that this can be done um, in ways that are not fueled by aversion. Um, so I would actually, and one reason I'm moving us on is because I just noticed the time. But I also really thank you for bringing this up, because um, it's deeply important to our practice in this world at this time. Deeply important. So thank you. Yeah. So see, where are we at? Oh yes. So I'm just going to give a little dedication of the merit, and then there will be some announcements. And um, so, again, just inviting everyone to find that seat, that posture that is of ease, that is gentle, it's kind, and bringing the attention back to the breath, to the body, resting here now. And reflecting perhaps on if in this last conversation perhaps there was a desire that was elicited for liberation, for freedom, for an end to suffering, to the violence in this world. That caring heart, that heart that cares about the well being of others. And may that care really radiate in this world, and may it touch beings that are close to us and far from us. May it generate skillful action and engagement that leads to happiness and well-being and justice. That all beings everywhere be safe from harm. And that all beings everywhere experience deep well-being, peace, and freedom.